Good morning, everyone. Can you just give me a thumbs up that you're able to hear me? Yes, good. Okay. Well, sorry about that brief delay. I'm Charlene Gulak. I'm an economic development advisor with RMED, which is Rural Manitoba Economic Development Corp, serving the Parkland and Midwestern regions of Manitoba. I'm joined today by Aaron Gonzalez, our executive assistant, who is managing the technical aspects of today's webinar. And also joining today are my colleagues, Liza Park and Deanna Fredfinson, who are also economic development advisors with RMED. Liza serves the western and central regions of the province, and Deanna's regions include Interlake and eastern portions of the province. We acknowledge that our Brandon office is located on Treaty 2 lands, the traditional homelands of the Dakota, Anishinaabe, Ojibwe, Cree, Dene, and Métis people. However, our team works extensively throughout Manitoba in the lands of Treaties 1 through 4 and the southern portion of Treaty 5. RMED respects the treaties that were made on these lands where we will work together. We are committed to reconciliation along the path to economic prosperity. RMED is committed to advancing rural prosperity. We are an organization created to improve, support, and increase success for economic development in Manitoba. And one of the ways in which we can work to do that is through information sharing and capacity building through today's webinar and a series of webinars that we are committed to hosting. A reminder that today's session will be recorded as the future resource for our digital library. If you have questions along the way, please note them in the chat and we will get to them as we move along today's session. A copy of today's slide deck presentation will also be provided post-session. And as you know, today's session focuses on a very relevant topic, which is rural business succession and transition, a critical issue for rural Manitoba. And given that the majority of us today joining today's session may be practitioners working in rural Manitoba, it's probably safe to say that we're all very committed to building profile within this ecosystem and seeing conversations evolve so we can see more successful rural business transitions occur within our communities. As part of today's session, we are very pleased to feature Darrell Goertzen, a business advisor with Venture Connect, who will highlight the process involved in a successful business transition. We're also joined today by Jamie Turetsky, Executive Director with Community Futures Parkland. And following Darrell's presentation, Jamie will provide some insight as to how a Manitoba-based business can engage in the Venture Connect process. We will also wrap up our session today with my colleague Liza sharing some information on RMED's primary research efforts underway in this space as to how we can build some knowledge and awareness of succession needs in rural Manitoba. As was highlighted, Venture Connect occupies a very unique space within the business buy and sell marketplace, supporting rural-based buyers and sellers in successful transitions. I had the pleasure to meet Darrell a couple of years ago, virtually, of course, during my previous role with Community Futures Parkland. Darrell provides an exceptional approach and perspective unique to rural business succession. So today we welcome Darrell Goertzen, Community Futures' own expert in business succession and Venture Connect. After a 25-year business career as an entrepreneur, business owner, and corporate manager, Darrell joined the Venture Connect team in 2012. And since then, he has worked with hundreds of business owners throughout Western Canada, helping them through the process of selling their business. Darrell is joining us today from beautiful and slightly warmer British Columbia, but is a former proud Manitoban and understands our landscape quite well. So Darrell, welcome, and I'll pass things over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Glad you could all be here today, and without further ado, we'll start the presentation. What I'm going to take you through is primarily, it's quite close to the workshop that I would go through with business owners, slightly different angle, but our focus is the same. So really our goal is to maintain strong business communities. And, you know, Venture Connect started because of a number of Community Futures locations noticing, you know, empty storefronts in the downtown, and thinking about how that was going to affect business communities in the future. So next slide, please. So what we're here to do today is to provide information and discussion about the challenges and effect of business succession in your communities. So our focus is that there is a demographic shift creating unprecedented buyer shortages. Business owners' inability or just lack of desire to create sound exit plans for their business. A serious lack of resources for small business owners in rural communities, and then the fact that obviously the thing that we want to avoid are livability challenges in smaller communities that struggle with business closures rather than business succession. Next slide, please. I mentioned Community Future. Well, Venture Connect is actually a subsidiary of Community Futures Alberta Clayoquot in BC, and a working partner with Community Futures offices throughout Western Canada. Community Futures, I believe you're all aware of, is a community-based economic renewal initiative funded by the Government of Canada and directed by local volunteer boards. And we work with primarily through the local Community Futures offices throughout Western Canada. Next slide. So first thing, that the very first point to never lose sight of is it's never too soon to start. On average, it takes over 2 years for a business to sell. This stat has been around for quite a while, probably just about 10 years now. Prior to that, you know, if you went 15, 20 years ago, it was much less. But that's the first sort of wave in the demographic, you know, change that's coming at us, is that starting, the sooner a person can start, the more likely they are. If there's one single factor that shows the difference between unsuccessful transitions and successful transitions, it's time. Next. There is a diminished demand for business purchases. So there's a shortage of both workers and entrepreneurs. Population growth, we know, has been slow, with most growth coming from international migration. It's not just a local problem, it's a problem in many developed countries around the world. Both business owners and communities have to compete to get noticed by potential buyers. So the pandemic shifted a little bit. If you were close to a major center, we noticed, you know, there were more people kind of moving out for more space. But prior to that, there had been a huge migration towards cities. And that still is an issue in many communities. Government and economic development agencies generally tend to focus on available workers, which is the crisis of the moment. And at Venture Connect, we are focused on the lack of business buyers, which is the crisis of the future. Next slide. So key number one is, I already touched on, demographics are hurting many rural communities. So 40% of small businesses are expected to transition within the next 5 years. So I've been using this slide for probably 5 years, and the numbers are getting there. There's been more and more studies coming out, and they're getting more and more dramatic. I have the CFIB one in January, I think it was, just said that 76% of business owners are planning on leaving within 10 years. 10 years is a pretty long horizon, but basically most of the recent stats are anywhere between 40 to 50% of buyers of sellers are planning on leaving within 5 years. Almost 90% of the decisions are driven by the owner's need to retire. The length of time, as I mentioned, has gone from 8 months to 18 to 24, and that's an old slide. Now it's 24 to 26 or 28. 83% of business owners don't plan at all for their business sale. And when I mean at all, I mean at all, resulting in a poorly presented opportunity, which can be very discouraging to buyers and lenders. 3 out of 4 business sales fail to close. And I could talk for an hour just about why that is and how frustrating it is, and and what we do when we work with people. By the way, I've been tracking this for the last 5 years, and when we work right through the sale process with someone, 8 out of 10 of them close. So we're gratified by that, but if people try and go on their own, there's a 75% chance that it won't work out. Business sales are emotional events for owners, and they have few resources to help them. And that results in really 3 out of 10 owners plan on simply closing their business without even looking for a buyer, which we really don't want to see. There are very few businesses that are unsellable if the owner has a plan and is reasonable about the sale price. Most of the time, there's a buyer who would be better off buying a business that's existing than starting something similar, as long as it was at the right price and etc. So we want to change that, and we want people to try and to be reasonable. Next slide. So 98% of all businesses in Canada are small businesses. Majority of buyers are getting older. I kind of touched on this already, so let's jump ahead to the next one. So the second key is that sellers make mistakes. So I'm a business owner and I want to sell my business, and I'm coming into a tough market. And unfortunately, a lot of the times I just make things worse for myself. As an owner and an entrepreneur, I'm focused on starting my company, on growing it, on maintaining it. And I'm not really thinking too much about getting out, except on my bad days when I feel like I've had enough. So most owners, they make a few key mistakes. The first one is they don't give themselves time. And I can't tell you the number of times where I've had an initial conversation with a seller who says, well, I'm going to give it a try, but if I can't sell it, I'm going to just close the doors. And I say, okay, well, fine, that's fair enough. How much time are you thinking? And they'll go, well, I'll give it a month. And I'm like, well, okay, nothing's going to happen in a month. It's not like putting your house on the market. There aren't that many buyers. It doesn't work that way. You need to give it at least 6 months. And so that's often a problem. There's often health issues where people are forced into a sale and they really don't have time, especially for older sellers. Cluttered, hard to understand financial information, so they don't have a package ready for buyers with the information that's required for a buyer to understand the business financials, as well as to be able to get financing for it. Many sellers waffle. One day they're ready to leave, and then they have a few good days or a month, and then they change their mind. And that, if they've opened up conversations with buyers, that really is very frustrating for the buyer. They do a poor job of communicating the value and opportunities of the business to potential buyers. And less than 1 in 10 do any planning at all for their eventual exit from the business. And that came from the CFIB study in January. So the sale of a business is a very emotional event, and small business owners have few resources to help them. there aren't too many people in most of our rural communities who have experience with this, because there simply aren't enough sales for that kind of expertise to reside in every community. Next slide, please. So another part of the issue is that only 5% of business owners sell at the peak strength of their business. So many of you may have seen something like this, the life cycle of business. We start off, business is growing, it goes as high as as far as the owner wants to take it. And oftentimes, as we get older in particular, we take our foot off the gas. We're quite comfortable with less income than we used to have. And the business loses some of its value. So depending on how far down this slope we go, the value really disappears out of the business. And that becomes a problem for financing, for a buyer. Obviously, we can't all sell at the peak of our business, but what we really want to do is sell before it gets down to losing, a lot of the value of the business. Next slide. So after all that doom and gloom, the third key is that there is a pathway to a successful sale. So most owners simply wing it, but by following a path, a plan, a process, they can greatly improve their odds of a successful outcome. And what I'm going to do now for the next couple of slides is just kind of walk you through a resource we have that and the process that we use to help business owners prepare for a sale. So we focus on 4 steps: planning, preparation, marketing, and then making a connection with buyers. The picture there is Pathway to Successful Sale, is a business owner workbook that is available through Community Futures that every business owner can work through self-directed if they want. It has checklists and information about each step in this pathway. Next slide, please. So in the planning stage, we help business owners to determine their own personal expectations from a sale. When I ask this question, what do you expect of the sale? Obviously, the first answer I get 99 times out of 100 is, money, a certain amount of money, how much money, whatever. But it's amazing how many times money is not actually the most important thing in a sale. There's a lot of other things. There's a legacy of the business. There's a transition. There's lots of other things that are also important. And when sellers see or have thought through this part of the process, then when a buyer comes to them, they do a better job of recognizing what a good fit is than if they haven't thought about this. Many times I have seen sellers, turn down deals without any idea of why they did it. And really it's because they hadn't sorted through what their expectations of the sale were. We also help in the beginning here owners to understand their exit options. So certainly they can work with us, but we also discuss other resources and other approaches, and so that they are fully aware of what all of their options are and can move with confidence down the path and be in charge of their own business sale. Also at this stage, we help them understand the market value of their business. And oftentimes there are some basic financial and tax implications that they ask questions about. I'm always careful to refer them to their own accountant for their own particular advice. But at this stage, they're often more comfortable asking me, someone from a distance, what they think might be stupid questions. They don't really want to ask their accountant, well, I don't really, because you start talking about a share sale and I just hear blah, 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 and then they leave. And, and so a lot of times I say, well, have you asked your accountant? And they say, yeah, but I didn't really understand what he said. He said a lot, but I don't quite understand. So I try and help them understand the basic concept rather than their own particular situation. And so, I'll say, well, yeah, I'll explain it in terms that they can understand it. And I've had lots of experience of, people who have no clue at all. So I can kind of get them confident enough that when they go, and I'll leave them with, okay, here's the 2 questions you need to ask your accountant. And also we give advice because if it's a corporation, for example, there's share sale, asset sale, right? And their accountant is almost always 99.9 times out of 100 going to say it has to be a share sale because of the lifetime capital gains exemption. But for many small business, the tax implication of an asset sale versus a share sale is not significant. It's, yes, maybe you save $1,000, but if you get $10,000 more on the sale because it's an asset sale, or you get a sale and you pay, $1,000 more in tax, your accountant might be upset, but you won't be, right? So don't leave keep all your doors open. So the interesting thing here is this step is often taken by owners well in advance of selling their business. It is a great step to do early. It can help them make good decisions about the operations of their business and how value is affected by their decisions in their last few years before selling. So many times I'll do a valuation for a client at this stage and they'll go, geez, I was hoping I would get a bit more. In fact, I just had a kitchen cabinet place that I did a valuation 2 years ago, year after the pandemic. And he said, it's, that's not really enough for my retirement. But we went through the valuation and what is in his business that drives value. And he said, okay, I'm going to go back and I'm going to do a few things. And he invested in some machinery. He did, he grew his sales. And now 2 years later, the business is worth 100 grand more than it was when we did that. And he's ready for a sale. And he's going to sell it now. So, a great outcome. And that was 2 years prior. So the record that I've had so far is 7 years. Somebody came 7 years after evaluation and said, okay, now I'm ready. So this is often a step that is done in advance, but it doesn't have to be. It can be done right at the start. Next slide. Next step is now we're getting serious and preparing the business to put on the market. So in this step, we help business owners to put together the financial information that buyers and lenders will need. We help them understand the market value of their assets and help them to be ready to share how the business works and the way it can grow with prospective buyers, which is very important to the value of the business. Next slide. So in the marketing step, and I'm zipping through these, of course, there's in the workbook, there's a ton of information and checklists and things through all of that. But in this step, once they're ready to take the step of selling their business, we help them understand who's likely to buy their business. So focusing on the buyer is really helpful for people. When I start having that conversation about, well, when I think about your business, I'm kind of picturing a buyer who looks like this. And in those kinds of buyers, are going to struggle with a down payment or, whatever. And we talk our way through it. And once they understand who the most likely buyer is for their business, then they can focus on how do I reach that buyer? So is their business a good one that should be dealing with a realtor or a broker? Generally, if there's a property involved, depending on the size of the business, some people want, that full-on support. Then this is the stage at which they want to engage, those kinds of resources. We always encourage them to have a good information package ready to share with buyers. Information about the business, about specifics about what assets are included, all the kind of information that a buyer will find helpful, and the lender. And then work out a good advertising strategy. The selling a business is different than selling, a home or, something on Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace, or there isn't one site. I mean, we have a website that's business focused, business for sale, but there are many others that are national and regional, and there's pros and cons of different kinds of approaches. And so we kind of work through that with each seller and help them to, become comfortable with a plan that's specific for their business. Next. The last step is when they've found a buyer, and the goal here is to help keep the deal together. As I mentioned before, 3 out of 4 sales fail to close, and sellers and buyers often struggle to actually finish off the sale. Misunderstandings, inexperience, and poor advice often cause the sale to fall apart. When we're involved in this stage, our role is to help both the seller and the buyer understand how to navigate this step successfully and to help them work through the issues that invariably occur. There's always little details that probably don't matter very much, but because we're near the finish line here, they get exaggerated importance sometimes. And when things block or when things reach an impasse, I find that it's helpful to have a third party suggesting alternatives that people can look at instead of becoming, an adversarial process at this point, and all or nothing. And that's our process. Next slide, please. So we work through those 4 steps at whatever pace and timing and in whichever way that sellers are comfortable with. So our focus, I mentioned before, the path of the workbook. So when we work with clients, these resources that you see here are free. The workbook is free. There's also a workbook. It's not part of our session today, but there's a workbook for purchasers, for business buyers. So if you have someone, coming to you looking to buy a business, there's also a workbook for that. We provide a free initial consultation. So the consultation is probably a little different than most businesses. In that consultation, I don't really, because of our nature as a social enterprise, subsidiary of Community Futures, our focus is not so much on, generating revenue for ourselves in that consultation as providing the best advice we can for that particular seller's situation to help them move forward successfully. So in the consultation, I will gather some information about the business, and I'll walk through their most common or their most logical options for moving forward and answer any questions they have. There's often, very simple questions about the process and that kind of thing. And then from there, they decide what they want to do next. On our website, anyone can list their business for free at any time. And we also have resources such as the workbooks that are free. Next slide. After the free consultation, there are other services that we do provide, and many business owners may decide to access services that are for a fee to help them. And some of the most popular service by far is business valuation, to help folks understand what the range for their business might be in the market. Business fact sheet, which is that information package. The sale mediation, which is simply working with them through the sale process if they don't have a realtor or a broker that's involved. That's writing up a letter of intent for them, that kind of thing. And there are our services are priced to be accessible to all sizes of businesses, and all for fee services include advisory support through the sales process. So the difference with us is that there's never a commission and we're not exclusive. So someone can choose to talk to us. They can work with a realtor at the same time. They can use us at one step. They can use someone else at another step. They can use us again. It doesn't matter. They can list on our website and other websites, no problem. And really our goal is that the seller is in control, the business owner, and we're just there to assist. Next slide. So the way that Venture Connect has operated and I've been doing this for 10 years, is our focus is there are a few options for succession support for most rural business owners. And most of those professional resources are interested in larger businesses and can be quite expensive. We have 10 years of experience with businesses like the ones in your community and know how to help them move forward with a greater chance of success than doing it alone or with inexperienced help. So our role is providing a resource that's safe, distant and confidential, as well as experienced and affordable. I started doing this 10 years ago, and when we originally started, we were doing it in person. And then we had requests from other Community Futures locations, and we started branching in. And of course, if you want to keep fees reasonable, you have to do it virtually. So I was doing virtual 10 years ago, and I had some hesitation at first. I thought, how could this be done without actually going into the business? And we used to get that objection, but what I've found over the years is actually it is so much better. Being distant allows the seller to be free. They can ask me anything. I'm a safe place. I'm not in their community. I'm not talking to them. They don't worry about, they don't have to see me in the street. I'm just somebody a long way away who does this for a living, that they can pick my brain. And the biggest thing with people, I think, in what I've found in 10 years, is the biggest reason people don't start is because they're not sure. They're not sure if they want to sell. And if they change their mind, they feel like they'll look stupid. And they'll cause disruption to their business and questions and stuff that they don't want to take on. And so they're hesitant to open their mouths in their own community. But I'm a long way away, and it's easy to just kind of talk it through and be, utterly transparent, where you have to be more guarded locally. So that was a real interesting, side benefit from this. Community stakeholders. We started, as I mentioned, Community Futures. Obviously, we have a relationship with Community Futures, and we get many, many referrals from Community Futures. I've also done many, many presentations to economic development, people from communities, from government, and we get lots of referrals from those quarters as well. And really what happens is, we don't do a lot of advertising because most of our work comes from referrals from people like yourselves and Community Futures, as well as business owners themselves after they've been through the process. So, and the role of Community Futures and other community stakeholders is really to create awareness of the service availability, and then referrals or just information about how to connect with us or Community Futures, and to access, a free consultation and whatever services that they choose. Next. And this slide is, when I think about, I mentioned the confidentiality of distance, but this is what I believe, and I've heard from business owners that they find valuable. So when I'm starting to have somebody that I can ask questions to, that's free, that knows what they're talking about and can answer my questions while I'm just considering maybe I might want to do this. The confidentiality of distance, as I mentioned. A key thing is hearing others' experiences. So the great thing about doing this through a wide regional area is that we get access to and experiences with many business. I have, I literally have dealt with thousands and thousands of businesses, and I'm involved in well over 100 business sales a year. So most of the time when someone talks to me, actually, I just had a conversation with a client in Manitoba yesterday, and I discussed his situation, and I said, okay, well, I've actually got two going on in BC right now that were the same kind of business and the same kind of, it's an employee interested in buying, and they were just a little further ahead. They were about a month ahead of where he was. And so I could share the experience of what those owners had just been through. And they had two scenarios. One, it was the building and land included or not, right? And that's a conversation that comes up sometimes because it's very difficult for first-time, business buyers to afford both. The seller's in a point, the business is worth a lot, is, how is this going to work? And I kind of talked through the two recent experiences that I've just been through that chose different approaches. So rather than me saying, theoretically, well, you could do this and you could do this, I could actually frame it in the course of two different businesses, and one chose this approach and one chose that approach. And so the business owners are always fascinated by hearing about others' experiences. And because we work in a wide geographic area, I don't have to worry about breaking confidences. I don't mention the companies. I don't mention which community. I might mention the province. I might, but I keep it vague enough that people can't put together who's who. But I can share the experience, and owners really like that. The other thing is ongoing support without commitment. So people can, I got an email the other day from someone that I had done evaluation for, and they're at now a further stage, and they feel very comfortable with their marketing, and they're getting a bunch of inquiries, but it's getting hot, and so they're thinking, okay, I might get an offer, and will you read the offer for me? And I'm like, sure, So the fact that they can pop back in whenever they feel like they need help, but they don't have to be involved throughout the process. And the fact that services are affordable. So just as an example, we charge $750 for evaluation. Valuations run from $4,000 to $10,000 in a lot of cases with brokers and other service firms. So for us, that $750 is affordable for just about any size of business if they need to. So, and sometimes there are programs that also cover some of the cost as well. So next slide. See, I just shaved my mustache. So the ways to engage, as I mentioned, they can list for free anytime, anywhere, refer for a free consultation. That can be done by email or just direct to the website. We also do workshops like this or directed to sellers, and that there is no charge. We provide that service if the local organization. I'm doing one in Kitimat in a month. I think I'm doing one in Hamiota soon. You know, and those we don't charge for that service. So that can be arranged just by contacting us or your local community futures. Copies of the free seller and buyer guides. And next. So I'll just leave you with, it is a challenging market. It's not business as usual. A lot of businesses for sale in the market and more coming. The pandemic, interestingly, changed timing for many. Some people stayed longer because of it and are now ready to get out. Other owners maybe are going to get out because they've burnt out through the pandemic. The three most important things business owners can do to improve their odds are: number one, give themselves time. Number two, know what a reasonable offer looks like. And number three, be prepared. And I think that's it. Yes, it is. All right, now, Jamie.
Excellent. Thanks, Darrell. Jamie, going to share my screen and you can tell me if you're seeing it right away. We just wanted to highlight the Venture Connect website and business listings option that's out there.
For sure. While you're pulling that up, I'll just chat a little bit. So our partnership with Venture Connect, it's been ongoing for about I'm going to say about a year and a half. And we've started to bring the services to Manitoba for about the last year. Our experience with it has been really positive, and so has the clients. It's really allowed us to like have more capacity within our smaller offices and offer that specialized service to those that are looking to buy or sell, and then connect them with Darrell. So, like quickly, how that kind of looks like is a client will always call in here first. We're sort of like the first kind of point of contact within Manitoba, and they're looking to buy or sell. Sorry, not just our office, but any community futures office in Manitoba. So they call in, we do a bit of a quick internal assessment on like what it is they need. We have access to like those past workbooks, those both buying and selling workbooks that Darrell shared with you. So if that is all they're kind of looking for at the moment, then we'll provide those to them. But if we're getting a sense that, you know, they're ready to maybe dive in a little bit deeper, and one of those services that he talked about there would be a real benefit to him, I'll go over the program with them and then connect or take the contact information. I provide that to Darrell, and then he reaches out to them. I wanted to show you guys a little bit of like, you know, kind of like a hard copy sample of one of the services that Venture Connect will provide for a business. So Dolphin Music and Electronics, this is a business fact sheet, brochure portfolio, if you will, that kind of brings together a nice little package that a seller could provide a buyer, just to give like that visual, those highlights to it. And it's just a really nice piece to have on. So when a business does, let's say, like an online listing, this can be an add-on package that they can put within the listing online that anyone can kind of click on, right? So it's, yeah, no, it's really good. Even at the end there's a bit of a community portfolio. So because we're close in the region, or whatever CF is closest to the business that is interested in selling, we'll help Venture Connect put together that community portfolio, so they get a good idea on the sense of community that they would be in and doing that. So yeah, so that's a little bit about how it all kind of works. some new, we have sponsored spots, I guess, is a good thing to mention. And if a client comes, let's say, from the Gimli area, they'll check in, see if we still have some of those sponsored spots. We'll say yes, like go ahead. So that's all just kind of behind the scenes admin stuff. We are always actively looking for ways to continue those sponsored spots. But as you heard Darrell say, just some examples of those costs, they're not unreachable. So even in the event that sponsored spots weren't a possibility, we would continue to promote this to the community and to the clients as well. So yeah. Did I miss anything, guys?
Thanks, Jamie. That's just an awesome service that's available, and awareness raising is so important because folks may not really realize that this service is accessible locally up until the point that they're actually looking or in a position where they may need to transition. So that's very important. Before we get into some questions, I missed introducing Michael Asante, our research and policy advisor with RMED, and in Michael's role, he plays a critical position in as far as illustrating some of the data and numbers that are relevant to rural communities. And of course, this is an area that I think we need to gain stronger understanding of in terms of need and access. So I'm going to pass the floor over to Liza and perhaps Michael if they'd like to just touch on some of the work that RMED's embarking on relating to research and succession.
Hi, everyone. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time. With RMID, and like Charlene alluded to, we are working on a business succession survey, which is going to be going out very soon. And we'll be sharing those with chambers and EDOs to try to push and get your support to push those into the business community. And this is part of that primary research data that RMID and Michael is going to be doing. And, we're trying to build a database of businesses out there that are potentially looking to sell and, long-term, potentially being able to share that with other government departments with listings of people looking to buy. So, long and short, it takes a lot of work to gather the data, and we also are aware and cognizant of the fact that some of the data we need to gather from businesses is private, and building those relationships with the communities and the businesses that are looking to sell is important and will take us some time. But so that survey will be launching soon, and we're just looking for your support to share that and help RMED kind of gather that first primary research for a succession strategy that we're looking to implement. Charlene, do you have any other comments along that?
Well, like municipalities are one of our primary stakeholders, so providing awareness to folks that are leading communities is really important as we move forward. We know that we need to build understanding and awareness on the importance of local government and the role that they play in terms of fostering a strong business community. So however we can build some of those relationships and partnerships and make referral over to great resources like the relationship built between the Community Futures Network and Darrell with Venture Connect. We want to be able to do that just to help support the business transition piece within our communities. So given that, let's open the floor to questions. If you'd like to pop something in the chat or put your hand up if you have something to share. Okay, Uriel has a question. Darrell, are you able to see it in the chat?
Yeah. So yeah, who does buy? Would you say it's more frequent a local or someone from a neighborhood community or someone from elsewhere? Yeah, it's interesting. I would say this is changing all the time. We focused, I've been working with PNP, for example, since 2013. So international buyers. And we've tried to do, you know, matching things and building the database and stuff. And, you know, I salute your intentions. I think it's a great service, but you need a good database. You need a hefty database to be able to match geographic and business type and skills and all of that. You need a lot of buyers and a lot of you know, what we would call inventory. So businesses for sale. Since the pandemic, what we've found is that the majority of buyers were already in the community. It was not that way pre-pandemic. I would say that was a big shift, and part of that I think was, you know, simply the mobility of the changing time of the pandemic. But the many of the buyers were relatively new to the community. So and I would say, you know, when I think about Manitoba, you know, BC, for example, has greater geographic challenges. If you're in one community, you know, an hour's drive down the road could be not very far geographically, but you could be separated by a mountain and, you know, that kind of thing. And it could not be very feasible. Whereas, you know, you can own a business in Winkler and live in, you know, anywhere 45 minutes away, right? You can live in Altona and run a business in Winkler if you really chose to. So so there's more people close, but I would still say that the majority of buyers are going to be somebody who lives within a reasonable driving distance of the business. But we are also seeing more international buyers coming along again. That's starting up. And so, you know, but those tend to focus on maybe 3 or 4 business types. So depending on what, you know, what's for sale. But yeah, it's usually a local. I have to say, more than anyone else, it's a local. But a lot of times it's a relatively new local. You know, somebody who's moved to the community within the last, you know, 3 years, kind of thing, that hasn't found a job or that they really like, and they're looking to branch out.
Darrell, I was wondering if you could reflect on any experience that you've had relating to social enterprise examples where a business, privately run business, has perhaps transitioned into a cooperative model or a social enterprise of sorts. And
yeah,
what you've seen with that.
It's interesting. That's a timely question. I have somebody, 3 people who just started a business that you know, a consulting business to do that, to help people walk through that process. They're looking at little larger communities. I've seen, you know, artist studios, I've seen retail businesses go that way. I've seen a few other, we have a few other examples of, you know, things like coffee shops or bakeries or whatever who have gone that route. You know, I think it's great. I don't see a ton of, I think there's more opportunity. So when I've got my hat on, my hat is very numbers driven. So if I think about right away, I'm thinking, okay, how many businesses are going to be for sale in Manitoba? There's X number. How are we going to find enough buyers to keep those going? Social enterprise, and all of these, outcomes are possible. Social enterprise is one. I think the biggest opportunity that I see out there that has no one pushing it yet is more of a partnership thing. So we have a little bit of that with some of the employee share things. And I had one experience in my life where we did, an employee share ownership program, and people bought into it. And then out of that grew an employee group who bought the company. But those tend to be in a bit larger companies, and they don't, they don't sort of happen kind of organically. And I've done a few where I had one really interesting business. It was a repair, so a heavy duty mechanical repair business, and the guy wanted to retire, and he started off and sold a quarter of his business to a mechanic who came in, somebody, midlife, 45, had done the, work wrenching, for years for a big company, but wanted to kind of build some equity. And he came in and he bought, but it ended up, the guy was really clever. He did it, we talked about it for quite a while, and he did it no money down. And he basically loaned them the money for the down payment to buy and he was paid for shares out of future dividends. So so he did it once, and then he did it a second time, and then he did it a third time, and then he did it a fourth time, and he was out. And so there were 4 partners who owned the business, each had 25%, and it was really slick and painless. It took them about 5 years. And there ended up being a partnership. So it's not a social enterprise. It's a pure for profit. But none of the 4 who ended up owning the business would ever have thought about putting that together. And it was simply because and the buyer, the seller, it suited his needs because he wanted to transition over a period of time, and he wanted to slow into that. So he went away in the winter. At first, he just went away for 2 months, and then it extended and extended. So I think that opportunity of creating more of a partnership, if a seller is very thoughtful about how they do it and they give themselves enough time, I think that's actually a great way to sell a business. And then you end up with a partnership agreement, and the business can go anywhere from there. So, and I've seen quite a few of businesses sold to employees or people who came in to be employees who, for the purpose of, because of they wanted to buy the business, doing that over time, I think is a really great option. So sorry, I hijacked your question and turned it into a hobby horse of mine.
No, it's great to see and understand that there's just multiple options as far as how that pathway unfolds. And if we can sort of collectively speak to these options to folks that are embarking within the process, that's all very positive.
Yeah. I see Michael's question. Based on your experience, are there any notable differences between assisting family-owned businesses and individual businesses with their succession plan? And absolutely. So I don't know if you remember, but in my presentation, I said that selling a business is an emotional time. Well, when it's a family, you can just exponentially increase the emotions. And yes, it's very, you need a therapist more than an accountant in that. It is funny because my first degree was psychology, not business, and most of the time I say I actually use that more. The numbers are the easy part. The emotions are the harder part. And with families, it is so difficult. It's not just because of the emotions, because there is that. Obviously, there's sibling rivalry. There's, you know, why is one person getting, not the other? All of that. All of these things can be worked through. The biggest problem that I see is that most of the time, the business just, because there hasn't been a plan, it gets to a point of dysfunction. You know, it's like that Peter principle, everybody rises to their level of incompetence. It's like the business grows to its level of maximum dysfunction. And then now we have to figure out how to create a succession out of it. And everybody's entrenched in, you know, you know, positions that you cannot, unsustainable positions. So, and that's not every case. Sometimes it works well, but when it goes into dysfunction, it's really bad dysfunction. So yes, it's much more, really it's necessary as a family to do it way ahead of time, like 10 years ahead of time in a lot of cases. And the parents generally avoid that like the plague. They want to be involved in the business as long as possible. And so then they take kind of the easiest path, whichever sibling is, you know, willing to make life simple for them. And even if that's not, you know, congruent with a long-term plan. So yeah, it can get very, very, very bad. Unfortunately. I've been involved in quite a few where I've said, really, you have no hope of all the children working in the business. There's no hope of this ever being and ending up anywhere except in court. So, you know, I've gone to parents and said, you know, really, if you want your family to speak to each other, you need to sell business. And so, which is a shame, but it's reality. Now, brothers and sisters are different. If your brothers and sisters actually bought the business together, they can get along really well a lot of times. As long as they're not giving it to their kids, then, you know, that ends up being a problem. But a lot of times family businesses together where they started together and then want to get out together, that works just fine.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. I see Uriel is typing a message. Also, Darrell, I'm really interested in if you could provide us with some forecasting, knowing where some of our population numbers are at in terms of the baby boomer segment in the prairie provinces. What do you see as unfolding over the next sort of 5 years as far as rural business existence and transitions?
Yeah, it's interesting to see. I think there's, you know, for sure, there's an aging population, and, you know, through all sectors, you have challenges finding enough buyers. You have challenges finding enough workers. You know, tradespeople with different focuses and that kind of thing. You know, the government is very focused on immigration. Some of that will work. Some of it is a huge change to our communities. You know, when I was in Manitoba back in January for a week, and my niece's husband is a doctor in a small community in southern Manitoba, and he brought up, when we were talking about business succession, he brought up, you know, the number of businesses in their communities that were bought by international buyers. And, and we discussed some were a good fit and it was great. Business, continues in the community, and it's what people are used to. In others, there's a significant change when someone new comes in and from another culture. And sometimes that might be good, and sometimes it's difficult for the community. And it certainly changes the makeup. So for sure, I think we're going to see a change in the way that businesses in our communities operate. Probably more so than many businesses have been 35 years or whatever. So I think we're headed to a period of serious change. And as community stakeholders, what we want is the change to be as positive as possible. So it's good to have different perspectives. It's great to have younger buyers come into the business and create, online stores and better hours of operation and, more energy and investment and all of that. But in each community, I think we need to really make sure that people are getting good advice. I did a bunch of work with Seashell Downtown Business Association, because they had a whole bunch of stores, and it's a touristy spot in summer, right? So they had a whole bunch of stores where everybody grew old at the same time. And so, suddenly, they looked around and went, geez, we could have 10 people on our main shopping street suddenly shut the doors because they're all, 70 years old and talking about or thinking about leaving. And none of them have done, a darn thing about getting ready for it. So they got some funding. I went in and worked with, in their case, we did it a little bit differently. We had actually a local person as well, and I provided guidance. And we've managed to sell and get new ownership for a pretty good number of those stores already in, whatever it is, 2 years, I guess. Many of them have already transitioned. And to me, that was a great way of the community being proactive and saying, this is going to be a problem if we don't do something about it. And the owners are not, no individual owner cares enough. The hair salon maybe is only worth 50 grand. And the owner in a place where houses are worth, $1.25 million, maybe the owner doesn't really care about the 50 grand, but the people that live there care about getting their hair done. And there, by the way, there's, half a dozen employees in there, and they care about their job. So we want this to continue. So how do we find a way to, facilitate that? So that's, those things I think are really, as a community, that's something that individually and locally as a community, you can look and say, geez, are we going to have a risk here? And if so, what can we do about it to kind of help facilitate the process for people? So we have a question. What's the experience with immigrants buying? I've been in a public hearing on immigration. The fear of some people is that not knowing the local dynamics could affect the chances of success. I suspect it's based on expectations on existing business versus new ones. Yeah, I was kind of replying it. I also say PNP in BC had a very bad experience with people buying businesses that they were not suited for, restaurants in particular, but retail as well. And the businesses would kind of run to the ground. They would be open, half the hours that they were before. And then after, a couple of years have gone by and they've got, the owner has fulfilled their contract, they would move to a larger center and, sell or shutter the business. So the PNP in the provincial program in BC changed their focus. They involved communities more. and that really improved their outcome. So that, that was very, very positive. So, I do think, I know Manitoba has a lot of action with immigration buyers, and I think you're going to get some of each kinds of experiences. You're going to get some where people come in and do a wonderful job, and you're going to get some where people have different expectations of how the garage is going to be run, or the coffee shop, or whatever, and it's not going to be quite the same. So no, I love it when a good German baker or French baker comes to town. That's always good when you get new good pastries to try. But it's not always positive. But hopefully, I think the provincial folks hopefully are tuned to this now, and are trying to look at people that are capable of running the businesses successfully. Okay, so Michael, regarding the graph I presented, which indicates many business owners sell during a period of decline, in your experience, how often do these businesses thrive under new ownership? It really depends how far down the path they go. If they get down, if they fall off that top and they get too far down, the problem is always the cash flow. If there's enough cash flow that somebody can buy themselves some time to turn the business around, then that's great. I quickly see, an online store, some social media marketing, more hours in retail or restaurants or cafes, and right away things pick up. But if it goes too far and there isn't enough cash flow that the owner has something to work with, then they're not going to be able to get a loan. And that's the biggest issue. They need some time to turn it around. So it can fall, but it can't fall all the way. So really, that's pretty much, I could look at the cash flow of the business and tell you whether somebody can make something of this or not, really quickly. But the sellers, unfortunately, don't see it that way. They don't. They're not looking. Cash flow is only one component in a seller's mind of what the value of my business is, and they often overvalue the other parts and undervalue how much the cash flow affects what the business price should be.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for your questions. Thank you so much, Darrell, for giving us perspective as to the process, but also your storytelling experience and the insights as to what you've seen firsthand are extremely valuable. So just like to thank everyone for taking time to join us today, and hope you have a good rest of the week. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Charlene. Okay, take care.